Welcome to the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. It has been a fantastic week in the sports world. You have had amazing events like NFL preseason, seeing the rookies, seeing the young stars of the football world getting some first action. We have seen the Cleveland Browns and Deshaun Watson in the language that was used in the stands as he was making his first appearance with the Cleveland Browns organization. You also had in the NHL world a massive injury that struck the Vegas Golden Knights, which we'll talk about in the second hour of the show. And we also had in the NBA the idea of a certain player leaving their current organization and going to another place to join a super team. Also, Major League Baseball, you have the 100 plus games in. You had a certain superstar who just very recently got busted for 80 game suspension. So it's been a crazy, and I mean crazy week in the sports world. Now, last week, episode 20 of the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media, we had Dennis Holmes from the Ignorant Thinkers podcast come on to break down the NFC side of the 2022 NFL season. We went over what teams are going to make the playoffs. We discussed in good detail if your team was going to be good, your team was going to be bad, or like my Chicago Bears coach Ian Rickelli's team, it's going to be a long season in 2022. But we already covered the NFC side last week. This week on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, it is time to break down the AFC side of the bracket. It is time to talk about what 7 teams are going to win and make it to the playoffs in the AFC. We'll talk about who's going to win the AFC East, the AFC North, the AFC South, and the AFC West for 2022. And more importantly, we are going to talk about who I believe is going to be the most dominant quarterback in the AFC for 2022. We have so much content we're going to break down on this show, episode 21 of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, and I'm happy to be doing it for you. So, going over to the AFC East, now it's going to be really fascinating to see what comes from this division because the Buffalo Bills the last couple of years have dominated the AFC East. They have been the gold standard for the AFC East division over the last couple of years. Understand that the Buffalo Bills, thanks to Josh Allen, thanks to Sean McDermott, and thanks to the Pegula family with ownership, they have really turned their franchise around. They've really become a solid contender when it comes to the NFL. So when you're talking about the AFC East, you're mainly going to focus on the Buffalo Bills. But let's take one step back for a second. Let's discuss the Miami Dolphins because I will give credit where credit is due. The Buffalo Bills, they've been good the last 2 or 3 seasons. Miami has been average, above average, mediocre the last couple of years. They drafted Tua. Tua really hasn't had a lot of weapons for him to deal with. They go get him a weapon in Tyreek Hill from the Kansas City Chiefs. They really did not have much of an offensive line. They build up that offensive line. And they switched in terms of coaching. Mike McDaniel's there. Brian Flores, unfortunately, was given the boot in Miami. He's now in Pittsburgh with Mike Tomlin. So when it comes to the Miami Dolphins organization, you have a new coach. You have a quarterback with some new weapons. And they made some moves on the defense as well. So, yes, the Miami Dolphins could make some noise this year, and there's a statement to be made that the Miami Dolphins could be a playoff team in 2022. There are some people who are trying to make an argument that one of the 3 wild cards in the AFC will be the Miami Dolphins. New England Patriots last year, they made the playoffs. They made the postseason. For the first time since Tom Brady wasn't there, for the first time in over 2 decades, the New England Patriots made the playoffs last year. They're going to be led by Bill Belichick and second-year quarterback Mac Jones. You're going to see if Mac Jones can really progress and can really step up his game from year 1 to year 2. They've made some changes in personnel when it comes to offense. N'Keal Harry's not there anymore. James White's no longer there. They've made some moves to try to gain some momentum out there in New England, gain Devontae Parker, wide receiver. But one question I really have, and really a question that I've been wanting to know for a long time about New England, is with the Patriots, Bill Belichick, the last 2 seasons, they have not been dominant. The last 2 seasons, New England Patriots have not been the dominant powerhouse that we were used to for 20-plus years. Understand that Bill Belichick and that organization has had to make changes. They've had to progress without Tom Brady. So a question you really got to ask yourself is, if you're New England, if you're Bill Belichick, can you win without Tom Brady? Can you win without one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history as your quarterback? Because unfortunately, I have a lot of people, and there's a lot of people, including myself, who don't believe it can be done. That Bill Belichick needed Tom Brady just as much as Tom Brady needed Bill Belichick during that 20-year campaign. That having a second-year quarterback from Alabama in Mac Jones, he is not going to be Tom Brady. He should not be living up to the expectations of a Tom Brady. So I will say with New England, it's a toss-up. I don't really like the organization in terms of what they've done over the last 2 off seasons. A lot to be left desired in New England. And the New York Jets, Zach Wilson, when he's not, stealing people's girlfriends, when he is not doing what he's doing behind the scenes in the offseason and making a lot of noise for himself, he needs to focus on not getting injured like he did in practice. I understand the New York Jets bringing in some weapons on offense. It's a solid start, but I don't think they're there yet. Understand that the New York Jets organization still has a lot of progress and still has a long way to go before they can start considering themselves a contender. Understand the New York Jets have the longest playoff drought in NFL right now. It's been 11 years since the New York Jets have made it to the playoffs. It has been a long time since they've been taken seriously in the NFL. So with the New York Jets, they have a long way to go. It's not their time this year. 2022 is not it, but I believe they have some building blocks, and they have some momentum going the right way out there in New Jersey. So with the AFC East, I'm going to break it down simply like this. The Buffalo Bills are going to win the division. The Buffalo Bills, they're going to have a dominant season. They're going to have one of the best records in the NFL, and understand that the Buffalo Bills are going to be the standard, the gold bearer of the AFC East. And then I would have the Miami Dolphins in second. They're going to be around 500. This is an organization that unfortunately is going to give Tua the boot at the end of the year because they didn't make the playoffs. And then I have the New York Jets in third place. Like I said, they have some building blocks. They have built some solid moves with the New York Jets, but they will still be 6 or 7 win season. And then the New England Patriots, I will not be surprised if they lose 10 or more games this year. I really don't like the direction New England has taken. I think that they have gone in the wrong direction. They're going backwards in terms of trends out there in New England. So understand that the New England Patriots organization, I have them last. New York Jets would be third. Miami Dolphins barely missing the playoffs in second. And then the Buffalo Bills will be first in the AFC East. They will be the only team to make the playoffs coming out of the AFC East. So before we get into the AFC North, go to our YouTube channel, hit the like button, subscribe, and share all of our content so you can follow all the content we have here on Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com. Hit the bell, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any episode of the Sports Angle every Friday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. Now, the AFC North is tricky. AFC North is going to be a dogfight. Because understand that the AFC North, you could go either way. The Baltimore Ravens last year had bad luck. Baltimore Ravens had every situation go wrong. They failed on multiple fourth down conversions. Lamar Jackson got injured at the wrong time, and the offense really did not pick up the momentum from Lamar Jackson. I understand that Tyler Huntley tried his best, and he did try his best, but Lamar Jackson is the guy who keeps that machine going. So when he was gone, Baltimore took a step back. You also had the Cincinnati Bengals, who made it to the Super Bowl last year, the feel-good story of 2021. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase connection, Joe Mixon on the running back. Offensive line got better this offseason. And the defense, Jesse Bates is not going to be there. But the rest of that defense from last year should be intact. Cleveland Browns organization is an absolute crap show. There's no nice way to say it. Cleveland Browns have dug a hole and have put themselves in that situation. Trading for Deshaun Watson, Baker Mayfield, giving Deshaun Watson all of the money despite not knowing if he was going to play or not. You also had them signing Amari Cooper, letting go of Odell Beckham Jr. in the offseason beforehand. You also had them paying Njoku all this money despite the fact that he really isn't a top 5 tight end in the NFL. And Kareem Hunt wanting to get traded out of Cleveland, that's a big indicator right there. So understand that when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, it is a terrible lose-lose situation, and I really don't expect much from Cleveland this year. And then lastly, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have a new quarterback for the first time in nearly 20 years. They brought over Mitchell Trubisky, the former Buffalo Bills quarterback, to be the new starting quarterback. They draft Kenny Pickett in the first round from University of Pitt. And understand that running back Najee Harris in year 2, he's going to get better than the year before. They lost Juju Smith-Schuster, but Deontay Johnson should be able to do good. Chase Claypool good as well. And the offensive line did improve. They did make some improvements to the offensive line out there in Pittsburgh. Defense is still stellar. You got TJ Watt, one of the best defensemen in all of the NFL. And also understand that the Pittsburgh Steelers have done what they needed to do to get Minkah Fitzpatrick back. So I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and there is some promise. There is some potential in Pittsburgh. So how I would do this standings for the AFC North is very simple here on Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I have the Baltimore Ravens, led by Lamar Jackson, as the leader and as the winner of the AFC North. I think that they will run away with this division. I think the Baltimore Ravens will get 11-6. They'll get the job done. I say Cincinnati Bengals, they will go 10-7. They'll be around what they were last year. And Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase will have a stellar year, not a spectacular, but a stellar year out there in Cincinnati. I say Pittsburgh Steelers will be next. They will be around 500, 9-8, 8-9 will be their record in Pittsburgh. Mitchell Trubisky will do enough to get them enough wins to be a playoff contender out there in Pittsburgh. And then lastly, the Cleveland Browns, I have them going 5-12. The Cleveland Browns are going to be a train off of the rails out there in Cleveland. I don't like the Deshaun Watson move. I think that appeal is definitely going to screw them over. And the Kareem Hunt situation has made it a lot worse out there in Cleveland. So I would say Cleveland Browns, they will go 5-12. Pittsburgh Steelers, I say that they will go 9-8. Cincinnati Bengals go 10-7, and the Baltimore Ravens will go 11-6. And since somebody asked about the AFC East, I say the Buffalo Bills will go 12-5. The Miami Dolphins will go 8-9. The New York Jets will go 7-10. And the New England Patriots will go 6-11. So moving on to the AFC South here on Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. The AFC South, the most undesirable division in all of football. A division that pretty much is flip a coin, but doesn't matter. No one cares about this division. You have the Houston Texans, who are trying to recover from losing Deshaun Watson, Davis Mills has potential. I think that Davis Mills has a desirable career. I think that he will have a decent career in the NFL, but Davis Mills is not Deshaun Watson. I don't think Houston even thought Davis Mills was going to be Deshaun Watson. Lovie Smith is coming in kind of as a 1-year gap or maybe a 2-year gap for the Houston Texans can bring in somebody else. Don't expect much from Houston this year. They will probably be top 5 in the NFL draft order for 2023. The Indianapolis Colts, they bring in Matt Ryan after his decade in Atlanta. Jonathan Taylor, the best running back in the NFL. And you have some wide receivers like Michael Pittman Jr. that has potential and will make a big statement for Matt Ryan. You also have an offensive line, which is one of the best in the NFL, and you have a top 5 defense. So the Indianapolis Colts will be a team to watch out for. You also have the Jacksonville Jaguars, an organization that has been first overall in back-to-back years. Now, I'm going to read out a statistic for you that's going to be very important. Since 2012, there has been at least one team that went from last to first in their division every year since 2012. Once again, I'll repeat that for the audience. Since 2012, there's been at least one team every year that was last in the standings the year before, and they get to first in the standings the next year. So Jacksonville Jaguars, they spent all this money this offseason. Trevor Lawrence and going into year 2. You have an actual head coach now in Doug Peterson, and you do have some solid weapons for Trevor Lawrence to go to, like, for example, wide receiver Christian Kirk, who they brought over from Arizona. You also have on defense some solid weapons like Devin Lloyd, Trayvon Walker. There is going to be potential in Jacksonville. Then you have the Tennessee Titans, which to me is a mediocre, average team. You got rid of A.J. Brown. You've gotten rid of Corey Davis. You've gotten rid of all of this talent that once used to be in Jacksonville. You know, Tennessee Titans, they no longer have Jack Conklin. They no longer have some solid guys on the offensive line. To me, the Tennessee Titans are going to take a step back this year because they do not have who they used to have. I understand the Tennessee Titans do not have the talent they once did out there in Tennessee. So to do the AFC South is going to be very simple. I have the Jacksonville Jaguars winning the AFC South. I think this is an organization that could win 8 or 9 games this year and win the AFC South. This is going to be arguably the worst division in the NFL. Indianapolis Colts is a huge wild card. I mean, this is a team that could go 11-6. This is a team that could go 6-11, depending on how Matt Ryan does. But I have Indianapolis in second place. Tennessee Titans, I have them going 7-10. I think Ryan Tannehill will take a step back. Malik Willis might come in at some point. Derrick Henry is going to start to regress as a running back. It happens around their late 20s. And understand that having no wide receiver for Ryan Tannehill to go to is going to affect him mightily. And then lastly, I have the Houston Texans going 3-14. Once again, I said earlier in the show, the Houston Texans are an organization that doesn't have much going for them this year. They're going to be taking a lot of growing pains. Davis Mills is going to get tossed around like a bowling ball. So I say that the Houston Texans 3-14. Tennessee Titans will go 7-10. I have the Jacksonville Jaguars going 9-8, and I have the Indianapolis Colts going anywhere from 12-5 to 6-11. Just depending on how interesting Matt Ryan does this season. And then the AFC West. I know all the people here in Las Vegas, they really want to know what your host Ian Rickelli's opinion is on the AFC West. Well, I'm going to say this. I only have one team coming out of the AFC West in the playoffs. I only have one team. There's another organization that I think could be close, but there is only one organization that I am confident in that I think that they can go all the way. Understand that the Denver Broncos organization, getting a legit quarterback in Russell Wilson, getting a quarterback who actually knows how to do his job instead of a guy like Drew Lock, for example. I think that's a fantastic move. I was a big fan of Russell Wilson going to Denver. I believe them getting Nathaniel Hackett was a fantastic decision by the Denver Broncos. I like the direction they're going. Jerry Jeudy on the wide receiver front with Courtland Sutton, and you have a running back situation with Melvin Gordon. So you have the Denver Broncos, who are going to be a fantastic team this year. They're going to make a lot of noise. You have the Las Vegas Raiders. They get Devontae Adams, the best wide receiver in the NFL. You add Max Crosby, who you brought in, bring Chandler Jones in. You also have Derek Carr, who you extend to a team-friendly deal. But there's a lot of question marks with the Las Vegas Raiders. The offensive line in Las Vegas is one of the worst in the NFL. I understand that the Las Vegas Raiders are going to have a terrible offensive line situation. And if you didn't have Colton Miller, they would arguably be the worst offensive line in the NFL. Understand that Darren Waller and his tight end situation, he wants to get paid. He should get paid by the Las Vegas Raiders. Josh Jacobs might be on his way out. Zamir White, their rookie running back, could be replacing him. Not a good look for Las Vegas. And the defense has gotten better when you're in an AFC West division that has top elite defense like the Chargers and like the Broncos and like the Chiefs. They still have the worst defense in the division. The Los Angeles Chargers, they're solid, they're consistent, they're durable. People like the Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert still going to keep making waves this season. But unfortunately, I look at the Los Angeles Chargers and I see mediocre. I see the Los Angeles Chargers, and all I see is a team that will be close, but not good enough. All I see is an organization that is not going to do what it takes to get to the playoffs in Los Angeles. You added Khalil Mack, you added J.C. Jackson, you got Derwin James, you got Nick Bosa. Understand that this is a Los Angeles Chargers team that has talent. I understand that they have some durability on defense, but what I don't like about the Chargers, A, their schedule is going to be pretty rough, and B, I really don't like the fact that the Los Angeles Chargers put all their eggs in one basket. Meanwhile, if that basket implodes or that basket has a leak in it, it's going to set everything back. And lastly, Kansas City Chiefs, the organization I have on the screen here, they've been the powerhouse of the AFC West for a solid decade. Didn't matter if it was Alex Smith or Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid found a way to win that division almost every single year. Understand that the Kansas City Chiefs have lost a considerable amount of talent this offseason. Losing Tyreek Hill is a big blow. Losing two key members of their offensive line is going to hurt Patrick Mahomes. Understand on defense, Tyrann Mathieu was a leader in Kansas City. He's no longer there. So when you consider the Kansas City Chiefs and what they have lost, do not expect Kansas City to be a powerhouse this year. Do not expect any crazy numbers from Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in 2022. They do not have the same roster. They do not have the same construction they once did in Kansas City. So doing the AFC West and breaking down this division for 2022 here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I have the Denver Broncos in first. I think that they will go 10-7 on the year. I have the San Diego Chargers going second. They will be 9-8 on the year. I think that they will be close, but they will not be good enough to make the playoffs. In third, I have the Las Vegas Raiders. They will go 8-9 on the year. Once again, the Raiders are not going to be good. They're not going to be bad. They're going to be average. And then lastly, the Kansas City Chiefs. I have them going last in the division, and that's at 7-10. Once again, that is 7-10 is what I have the Kansas City Chiefs going. And honestly, I'm being quite generous with that one because I look at the Kansas City Chiefs and I don't know how well Mahomes is going to do without his key weapons and his big meat wall protecting him. So as we've done our predictions here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And understand that when it comes to the 7 teams that are making the playoffs, I will repeat it once again. So here's what your host, Ian Rickelli, has. You can read the screen right there if you need to look at it. I have the Buffalo Bills making out of the AFC East, then the Dolphins in second, Jets in third, and then the Patriots in fourth. AFC North, I have a trio making the playoffs. Baltimore Ravens will take it, followed by Cincinnati, followed by Pittsburgh, and then a terrible season by Cleveland. AFC South, I have 2 teams making it. I have the Indianapolis Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars doing enough to get 9 wins and make the playoffs. And then lastly, in the AFC West, I have the Denver Broncos being the sole representative out of the AFC West. I think the Chargers will be around 9 wins. The Raiders will have 8 wins. It will be close, but it will not be good enough to win the AFC West. Now, I will recommend everybody down below and everybody watching around the world, if you have your picks for the AFC, if you have the teams that you want to choose for the AFC, put your picks down below, comment them, or if you're on our social media at Sports Angle on PR, go down and tweet at us or share that with us. I would very much like to know what you think about the AFC. And for the people who are not here last week, here is my NFC bracket for the 2022 season. We have the Philadelphia Eagles coming out of the NFC East. We have the Green Bay Packers, the Vikings, and the Detroit Lions coming out of the NFC North. Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming out of the NFC South. And then we have the duo of San Francisco and LA coming out of the NFC West. So when talking about the AFC, I mentioned there was one team I think stands above the rest. There is one team that I truly believe is going to be the best in the AFC, a team that I believe will be the top dog in this division, and that's the Buffalo Bills. Now, first segment, I want to explain to all of you why I'm so confident on the Buffalo Bills. First segment, I really want to break it down and really explain to everyone why I'm so confident in Buffalo. Josh Allen, to me, is the most talented quarterback in the NFL right now. Understand that Josh Allen is an organizational, once-in-a-lifetime talent in Buffalo. Understand this is a guy who's gotten better every single year he's in the league. Understand that Josh Allen, thanks to guys like Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis, has improved, has gotten better. His accuracy, his completions, his yards, his touchdowns. Understand that when it comes to Josh Allen, the guy he was in 2018 compared to the guy he is in 2022 is light years different. If you saw the rookie film on Josh Allen, he looked like an average quarterback. You see Josh Allen in the 2022 AFC divisional round against Kansas City, that was the best performance we saw from Josh Allen. That AFC divisional round was the best highlight reel, the best film, the best tape we had on Josh Allen. His accuracy, the way he passed the ball to Gabriel Davis, the way he was faking out defenders, the way he was utilizing time. Understand that Josh Allen put up a near-perfect game against Kansas City. Main problem was that Patrick Mahomes did put up a perfect game, whereas Josh Allen put up a near-perfect game. So Josh Allen is the motor of the Buffalo Bills. Their running game is solid. I'll give credit to the Buffalo Bills. I like their running game, and I'm not just saying this because they have Zach Moss, the University of Utah legend himself, and Zach Moss on their depth chart. Understand that I'm not just saying this because I am a huge fan of guys like Devin Singletary, who I think could definitely make some key moves for the Buffalo Bills, is not because they drafted a solid running back in James Cook, who will get some solid touches this year in the Buffalo Bills system. I actually think all three of those guys are the reason why the Buffalo Bills are going to do well. Understand that you have a guy in James Cook who's coming from University of Georgia who has won championships. Understand you have Devin Singletary who has been in these big games before. Understand this is a guy who knows what he's doing. And Zach Moss is small in stature, but he is big when it matters the most. So when you look at Zach Moss, you look at Devin Singletary, and you look at James Cook, they have a 1-2-3 punch out there in Buffalo, and that's what I like about them. I like the fact that the Buffalo Bills are going to be able to use the running game more often than they did last year. And lastly, the wide receiver core has depth. Not only do you have Stephon Diggs, a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL today, not only do you have an up-and-coming solid wide receiver in Gabriel Davis out there in Buffalo, but you have Isaiah McKenzie. He's solid. You have Jamison Crowder, who's been a solid receiver. You have guys like Marquez Stevenson, Tanner Gentry, Tavon Austin. They're not flashy names by any means, but what they are is depth. They are wide receivers in Buffalo who they are going to use to their advantage. You have Khalil Shakir, who, by the way, they drafted from Boise State. He is going to be a solid wide receiver in the NFL. So the Buffalo Bills have 6 wide receivers that they can use. And not to mention Dawson Knox and a guy named O.J. Howard, who they got over from Tampa Bay, will be a 1-2 punch at the tight end. They could use a 2 tight end set if they have to in Buffalo. So you have multiple weapons for Josh Allen. You have a trio of running backs who could use more running lanes in Buffalo. This is the reason why I think the Buffalo Bills are the best team in the AFC. This is why I'm very confident in the fact that this is a Buffalo Bills organization who has done whatever it takes to get better in 2022. So my angle to all of you, the Buffalo Bills will represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. The Buffalo Bills will be your representative for the 2022 Super Bowl, Super Bowl 57. They will be in that Super Bowl. Because I think Josh Allen has what it takes. I think the running game has what it takes. And more importantly, I'm a big fan of the depth they have on their roster. So, when talking about the Buffalo Bills organization, I also forgot to mention their offensive line. I also forgot to mention that Dion Dawkins has become a better offensive lineman as time has gone on. They got better by adding Roger Sofield at left guard. Having Mitch Morse at center is a solid improvement and a guy who really has been improving his game as the older he has gotten. And Spencer Brown, this right tackle for the Buffalo Bills, understand that Spencer Brown, 24 years old, just getting started in his career, he has been improving. And that's really the main focus I have for the Buffalo Bills, is that their offensive line has improved. Their tight end core has improved. The depth at the wide receiver position has improved. And the running game has gotten better. And you take all of that and you mix it together, you pour it in a pot, and you put it in the oven. I think you can get a Super Bowl out of it. I want to know from everyone watching around the world, though. I want to know from everyone watching around the world, do you believe the Buffalo Bills will win the Super Bowl this year? Do you believe the Buffalo Bills are the best team in the AFC this year? Let me know in the comments down below. And since I didn't mention the defense, I know there's going to be a lot of people who yell at me about that, I'll get into it. Just because you asked, just because you're so kind, I will talk about the defense. Gregory Rousseau, Carlos Basham, two young defensive players. They are going to get the job done in Buffalo. You added a veteran who's going to be a leader in the locker room in Von Miller. Ed Oliver, he's had some troubles. Jordan Phillips, you brought him in. He tried to fight Josh Allen right away. Understand the Buffalo Bills brought in a variety of veteran leadership and young and hungry defenders. That locker room in Buffalo is going to have a mix, a batch of talent. You also add in Matt Milano, who they paid to make sure he stayed there. Tremaine Edmonds, who's become better as time goes on. And Tre'Davious White, who's a top 5 corner in the NFL today. So Buffalo is going to have a top 5 defense. Buffalo should have a top 5 offense in the NFL. Understand that the best teams who win a Super Bowl are the organizations that have not only a top 5 offense, but also have a top 5 defense as well. So now we're talking about the Buffalo Bills here on Sports Angle. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. Follow us on all social medias at The Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, and follow at PR Connections Radio on all social media platforms, and go to the website, prconnectionsradio.com. And if you are on our YouTube, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any episodes of The Sports Angle. So I mentioned the Buffalo Bills, but a question arose, and honestly, it was a poll question that I asked all of you. Now, if you go onto our Twitter at Sports Angle on PR, I ask poll questions. I put up questions all the time to see what everyone thinks. I put up a lot of questions because I want to know from the fans, I want to know from the audience what you believe is a current situation in the NFL. So a poll question I asked for all of you was this. Who do you think is the best offensive line in the NFL? Who is the best offensive line in the AFC? Now, I did get a mixed reaction to this because there were some people who put a certain team, there were certain organizations that got put there, but the poll question that I asked you about who has the best offensive line in the AFC, I asked, is it the Cleveland Browns? Is it the Tennessee Titans? Is it the Baltimore Ravens? Or is it the Denver Broncos? And with 48% of the vote, you'd said the Cleveland Browns. So 48% of you said the Cleveland Browns have the best offensive line in the NFL. Well, I like you, Twitter. I like my audience, but I respectfully disagree. I say the Denver Broncos have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Understand, this is an organization that has cleverly built a solid reputation. So I respectfully disagree. And the last poll question that I asked was, what orange NFL team will win the most games this year? The Cincinnati Bengals, the Cleveland Browns, or the Denver Broncos? Well, 53% of you said the Cincinnati Bengals, 33% of you said the Cleveland Browns, and then 13% of you said the Denver Broncos. The fact that more of you believe the Cleveland Browns, who are going to go 5-12 this year, are going to do better than Denver, I'm very surprised about that. I'm really shocked that there is a percentage of you who believe that the Cleveland Browns with Deshaun Watson, who's not going to be there much this year, is yet going to have a better record than Denver. A Denver Broncos organization who's brought in Russell Wilson. An organization who has brought in good talent. So once again, I disagree with you, but you know what? It's the fan vote. It's a poll question for all of you. My answer does not matter in a poll question. So the best offensive line in the AFC, you guys said the Cleveland Browns. So there was the answer to that question. I also asked who has the worst offensive line in the AFC. I asked all of you Who do you think has it the worst? And funny enough, you actually gave me an answer I was not expecting. So the four possibilities for the worst offensive line in the AFC that we asked on our Twitter at SportsAngle on PR. I asked, is it the Cincinnati Bengals? Is it the Chicago Bears? Is it the Las Vegas Raiders? Or is it the Houston Texans? It's live, folks. Anything can happen. So I pretty much asked this poll question to everyone watching, and interesting enough, 48% of you said that the Cincinnati Bengals have the worst offensive line in the AFC. And I find that incredibly interesting because you got to understand the Las Vegas Raiders came second on that with 28% of the vote. So you had the Pittsburgh Steelers at 4%, the Las Vegas Raiders at 28%, you had the Houston Texans at 20%, and then the Cincinnati Bengals at 48%. Now, here's why I'm going to disagree with you on this. The Cincinnati Bengals not only spent a lot of money and time and resources this offseason to upgrade their offensive line, but the Las Vegas Raiders took a dump on their offensive line. They've let go of players. They traded guys away. Alex Leatherwood, year 2, has to step up. He cannot do what he did last year. You understand that Richie Incognito retired. He's no longer there anymore. You traded away Rodney Hudson. He was a vital part of the offensive line. Understand that the Las Vegas Raiders, if you didn't have Kolton Miller, I would say that your answer should be 56%, not 28%. Understand that if you took last year's Cincinnati Bengals offensive line, I would understand the 48%. But the Las Vegas Raiders, without a shadow of a doubt, have the worst offensive line in the NFL. Understand that the Las Vegas Raiders are going to have Derek Carr running for his life in the NFL. Understand that Josh Jacobs isn't going to get much far in terms of line of scrimmage, not because of talent, but because of the fact that he has no offensive line to protect him. Zamir White is not going to have much options with the offensive line in front of him. So, to me, Cincinnati 48%, Las Vegas 28%, Houston 20%, and Pittsburgh 4%. I respectfully disagree, and I will say the Las Vegas Raiders here on this show have the worst offensive line in the NFL. They're not even the AFC, the NFL. Because the Las Vegas Raiders have stripped away their talent. The Las Vegas Raiders have taken all of the talent they once had, and they have gotten rid of it to bring in Davante Adams. They got rid of it to bring in Chandler Jones. They got rid of it to re-sign Max Crosby. Understand that all you have to do is look up the Raiders' offensive line on their depth chart, and it shows you the lack of talent that they have. Even their depth has been taken away. I mean, understand that Denzel Good retiring at age 29 tells me that the Las Vegas Raiders even sacrificed more of their offensive line depth to try to bring in star talent. I mean, their offensive line this year, you have Kolton Miller, who's the only one that's above average. You have Alex Bars, who, as a Bears fan, I am very familiar with Alex Bars. There's a reason why he's in Las Vegas now. You have Andre James, who, you know what? Andre James, you know, he's been there for a few years. He has not been a flashy guy. You know what? Maybe he has some potential. At right guard, you have Dylan Parham. And I will say this about Dylan Parham. I will give him a little bit of a break. Understand the fact that Dylan Parham is a 22-year-old rookie with the Las Vegas Raiders. Understand that they're having a rookie offensive lineman being at right guard. And Alex Leatherwood, their first-round pick last year, had about 5 penalties a game. Hopefully he doesn't do that this year. So you have a veteran at left guard. You have a solid guy at left tackle. You have a undetermined center. You have somebody who's left to be determined. You don't really know what you're getting from him. And understand that this is a guy that when they signed him in 2021, they gave him that 3-year deal. It was to be a backup to Rodney Hudson. Now he's the starter because Rodney Hudson's in Arizona. So when I look at the Las Vegas Raiders offensive line, I respectfully disagree with my audience that says the Cincinnati Bengals have the worst offensive line in the AFC. I respectfully disagree because of the lack of depth the Las Vegas Raiders have. I disagree because the Las Vegas Raiders have sacrificed a lot on their meat wall, behind their meat wall, in order to get Davante Adams, in order to get Chandler Jones. I don't like the Raiders, what they've done this offseason, and honestly, I'll say this without any shock factor. I think the Las Vegas Raiders, when they don't make the playoffs this year, I think Mark Davis will make a change at quarterback. I very much believe that Mark Davis will swap out Derek Carr after this year. Because understand that once they don't make the playoffs, once they go 8-9, like I said, I truly believe that Mark Davis, after 8 seasons with Derek Carr, the longest quarterback tenure they've had for a long time in Las Vegas, I say that they will go out and they will draft a quarterback. They will go out and sign a veteran to a 1-year deal, 2-year deal. Because understand that Mark Davis has trusted Derek Carr because he really didn't have much talent around him. Understand that Mark Davis understood that Derek Carr, the first 3 or 4 years, was young, was unpolished, was unproven, and that's the reason why they kept him around. The last 3 seasons, the argument's been made that the reason why they really didn't have much success was because he didn't have a legit number 1. He did not have a legit number 1 wide receiver. He didn't have a Amari Cooper. He didn't have a Davante Adams. That was the argument. So this season, they went out and got him that talent. But the argument that I'm going to make is that since you don't have much depth on offensive line, if Colton Miller gets injured, you're not going to have much behind him. If you have a rookie in Dylan Parham who gets injured, you're not going to have much behind him at right guard. If Alex Leatherwood gets injured at right tackle, you do not have much behind him. So, because of the lack of depth you have on offensive line, all it's going to take is one injury, and Derek Carr is going to be even running more for his life on every play. And if they don't make the playoffs this year, like I said before, I will not be surprised if Derek Carr is handed his walking papers. I will not be surprised if he gets traded out of Las Vegas due to Mark Davis's impatience and having enough of losing. Because Mark Davis got one characteristic from his dad. And in a roundabout way, I can respect it. In some parts of the way, I can't. The one point that Mark Davis got from his dad is that he wants to win. Mark Davis will spend this money because he wants to win just like his dad did. Mark Davis is going to want to get Davante Adams because he thinks he can win. He went out and got a Chandler Jones on defense because he believed he could win. Don't be surprised if next year they go for a big fish quarterback because he believes he can win. The moral of the story, the quote that the Raiders have been synonymous with, just win, baby. Just win, baby. That's Mark Davis. Mark Davis did the same thing in Las Vegas Aces, by the way, by getting rid of Bill Laimbeer, who was a solid coach, and getting the best in Becky Hammon. Understand that Mark Davis believes the one thing his dad did. The problem that Al Davis had was that in his later years, he took it way too far. Is that if they didn't win every 2 years, he would fire everybody and start from scratch. I understand that Al Davis, after 2002, went after and got big names and then got rid of them because they weren't winning enough. I understand that his impatience is actually what led to the downfall of the Raiders in the 2000s, early 2010s. That same mentality that worked in the 70s and 80s was backfiring on them in the 2000s and 2010s. So what I hope for Mark Davis, and I'm saying this unapologetically, Mark Davis, I hope that you're doing the 1970s, 1980s era of your dad, not the 2000s, 2010s era of your dad. Because when you were in the 70s and 80s, that method worked. You went out and got talent. You didn't care how you got it, as long as you won. So my angle to end all this off is that to the Las Vegas Raiders fan base who hates my guts with a passion, to the Las Vegas Raiders organization, this is coming from Ian Rickelli, the host of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I want you to do good. I expect you to do good. Mark Davis expects you to do good. What I hope doesn't happen is that Josh McDaniels becomes the Denver Broncos Josh McDaniels. What I hope doesn't happen is that you doing the Patriots way 4.0 doesn't backfire on you. And what I really hope doesn't happen in Las Vegas is that just like the casino, they go all in, they put all their chips in the middle, and it backfires on them terribly. I hope that doesn't happen. In fact, going 8-9 would be probably the best case scenario for the Las Vegas Raiders. Because 8-9 will not be good enough to make the playoffs, but will not be bad enough to get them a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. It will be an average season in Las Vegas. And to me, that's the best case scenario. Because understand that if you make the playoffs in Las Vegas, the entire town expects you to win that championship. If you make the playoffs here in Las Vegas, the sports entertainment capital of the world, they expect you to win. They expect you to do what the house does at the casino. Win, win, win. So just making the playoffs will not be good enough in Las Vegas. Being a first-round exit will not be good enough in Las Vegas. Just take a look at the Vegas Golden Knights as an example. When they lost to the Montreal Canadiens in the Western Conference Finals, the fans got mad. When they lost to the Dallas Stars in the Western Conference Finals, the fans said it wasn't good enough. When you lost to the San Jose Sharks in the divisional round, the fans moaned and groaned. Understand that this is Las Vegas, Nevada, and this is where we expect success. This is where we want success. So to me, the best case scenario for Las Vegas is that you go 8-9, you barely miss the playoffs, and you buy more next year. Because if you're a first-round exit, this town's going to be considering you a failure. If you make the playoffs and get bounced right away, the fan base will revolt. They'll ask for certain players to get traded. They will ask for certain people to be released, because that's unfortunately how this town operates. You either win and go all the way, or you didn't get there at all. So we're going to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders for the last couple of minutes here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. And I did one last poll question on our Twitter, at Sports Angle on PR. I did one last question because I needed to know, what did you guys think? The poll question I asked is, who is the best quarterback in the AFC? I needed to know from all of you, who do you think is the best quarterback in the AFC? So, the first person I put on there was Josh Allen. The second person I put on there was Lamar Jackson. The third person I put on there was Deshaun Watson. And the fourth person I put on there was Patrick Mahomes. Now, before I give out the answer, I want to know from all of you, who do you think won that poll? With 71% of the vote, who do you believe won this vote? Because it actually surprised me how dominant this question was. I did not think that this quarterback would get 70% of the vote as the best quarterback in this conference. Now, it wasn't Lamar Jackson and it was not Deshaun Watson. They both got 7% of the vote. It was not Josh Allen. He got 14% of the vote. With 71% of the vote, Patrick Mahomes got the best quarterback in the AFC. And to end this on a high note, I agree with you guys. I agree 1,000% with my audience. You made a fantastic decision. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the AFC. He's not the most talented quarterback in the AFC, but he's the best quarterback in the AFC. Understand that when it comes to Patrick Mahomes, his agility, his awareness, his accuracy, his accolades, there is no quarterback in the AFC who can do what he has done on the field. There is really no quarterback who has done what Patrick Mahomes has succeeded to do in the last 5 years. So I agree with the fan base here. 71% of you said Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the AFC. Josh Allen got 14% of the vote, and Lamar Jackson got 7%. So I definitely want to appreciate everyone watching around the world, going on to our Twitter at SportsAngle on PR, and voting for our questions. I definitely appreciate all of your support. And also go to our YouTube channel at SportsAngle on PR Connections Radio. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell so you not miss any episode of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. And the last big topic that came out of the NFL world, it is not AFC related. That's why I saved it for the last four or 5 minutes. The Washington football team had an 80% attendance rate in 2021. I'm going to repeat that again for the people in the back. The Washington Commanders had an 80% attendance rate for last year. That means that throughout all 17 games, the Washington Commanders only got a fan 80% of their stadium filled. I want you to understand that people like the Cleveland Browns, who got 99% of their seat capacity filled, was great. Understand that when it comes to seat capacity, that is embarrassing. Understand that for a professional NFL team to only get 80% of your stadium filled is a joke, is an embarrassment, is an absolute disgust. Because understand that the NFL, when you have Cleveland at 99%, New England at 98%, Los Angeles at 98%, understand that majority of these teams are at 90%. As a matter of fact, there was only 2 teams last year who had under 90. The Washington Commanders at 80% and the Detroit Lions at 89%. Understand that teams like Las Vegas, who had 95% capacity, was fantastic. Understand that the Las Vegas Raiders getting a 95% seat capacity is average in the NFL. The Washington Commanders, once again, had an 80% seat capacity. Understand the Washington Commanders last year had a game where it was only at 64% capacity. That means that a little under 40% of the stadium was vacant. And this is a professional NFL team. This is a professional football team struggling to fill their seat capacity for a majority of their games. Understand, this is a Washington football team that their highest seller was at 94%. So 94% was their high, 64% was their low, 80% was their average capacity. Now, you might be asking yourself, Ian, the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, why does this matter? Why does it matter that the Washington Commanders only had an average percentage of 80% capacity? Well, let me explain to you why. There has been a report that Dan Snyder, the owner of the Washington Commanders, wants to move the team to Washington, D.C. There's been a report that they want to go from Andover, Maryland, and move back closer to D.C. I think this report might have a reason with it. I understand that FedEx Field has been one of the worst stadiums in football for the last decade. FedEx Field had the infamous incident last year where a certain section of Eagles fans fell onto the stadium because a gate collapsed on itself. How about the sewage situation? The fact that you had a sewage pipe go onto the stadium and drench fans with sewage in the stands. How about the incident where you had a pipe in the men's bathroom bust open and do all of this sewage in the men's bathroom? How about the fact that FedEx Field at one point held one of the largest fan attendance in the NFL? It had one of the largest stadiums in the NFL. But then, around 2011, they tarped off the entire top half of FedEx Field. If you look from an aerial view of FedEx Field, the top half has been intentionally tarped off. In fact, you can see where they did it. They're also, to fit TV regulations, there's been times where they have tarped off sections of FedEx Field because they weren't selling those seats. So my question to all of you and everyone watching around the world is that, would that be the reason why they're trying to leave FedEx Field? Because they had an average seat capacity of 80% last year? Could that be the reason why the Washington Commanders are trying to leave Andover, Maryland? Because understand that this was an organization that back in 2019, I'm going to use the 2019 numbers, they had an average capacity of 87%. So you went from 87% in 2019 to 80% in 2021. So if you do basic economics, that will say that next year, 73% will be their average capacity for 2022. And since I love doing research and since I love doing this for the show, in 2018, they were below 85%. Understand that it has been a long time since the Washington Commanders were at 90% capacity. Understand that it has been over 5 years since the Washington Commanders have filled a stadium capacity above 90%, which is absolutely embarrassing. Okay? That is an embarrassing fact. So I want to ask all people watching around the world, do you think the Washington Commanders should be forced to leave Andover, Maryland? Do you think that the Washington Commanders should force Dan Snyder to sell the team? Because their attendance is atrocious. Their attendance is bygone awful. And really, if I'm looking at Dan Snyder and I'm talking to you directly, fix your attendance. Fix your problem. Because understand that when it comes to Washington Commanders, I don't like the organization. I don't like Dan Snyder. And more importantly, I don't like how it's being ran. I don't like how it's being ran as a boys' club in the NFL. So my angle to the Washington Commanders, get your attendance up, fix FedEx Field, and move back to Washington, D.C. You used to have RFK Stadium, by the way. Move back to Washington, D.C. Please. Now, getting into the NHL portion here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. The Chicago Blackhawks, they have had an eventful offseason. And the report that came out about Alexander Nylander was unfortunate, and that's a topic we're going to start with right now. Alexander Nylander, the 24-year-old, the former top 10 pick by Buffalo, the guy who was drafted 8th overall in the 2016 NHL draft. For anybody who was wondering who got picked immediately after Alexander Nylander, who was the guy who ended up being right after him? Oh, it just so happened to be two-time Stanley Cup champion Mikhail Sergachev. You know, that defenseman who's won back-to-back Stanley Cups with the Tampa Bay Lightning, a vital part of that team. He went number 9. Number 10 was Tyson Jost. You know, the guy who played for the Colorado Avalanche. Good part of that organization. I mean, understand that this was a great draft for a lot of teams except for the Buffalo Sabres. But Alexander Nylander last year had a very unfortunate situation. This was a guy who injured his knee, and while having knee surgery, will be out for an entire season while recovering from surgery. Understand, this is a guy who injured his knee in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and because of that, will be out for the entire year. This is also the guy who got traded to Pittsburgh in exchange for Sam Lafferty. This is also a guy who began the season on injured reserve, recovering from said surgery. So for anybody who wants to jot down that number real quick, he has missed a year and a half, essentially, with a knee injury. Understand that for an NHL hockey player, you missing a year and a half of your career is crucial. Missing a year and a half of your career is a devastating injury that most guys don't come back from. Now, I understand there's going to be some people who are going to make the argument that last year he had 8 goals in 23 games in the AHL. There's going to be people who are going to make the argument that, you know what, he has had 13 goals in his career. He's still 24 years old. He's got time to turn it around. Ian, he still has time. He's 24 years old. He's had multiple injuries, but he can still turn it around. Well, here's where I'm going to disagree with you. Understand that a guy like Alexander Nylander, he had a lower body injury in 2017. Understand that this is a guy who got injured, like I said, in 2020. This is a guy who has gotten injured multiple times in his career. So as unfortunate as what I'm about to say, Alexander Nylander has been shown to be injury prone. Alexander Nylander has been proven that he can't stay on the ice for that long. Understand that his entire career, he played 65 games in 2016-2017. He played 51 games in 2017-2018. He played 49 games in 2018-2019, 65 in 2019-2020, missed the entire 2020-2021 season, and has played only 23 games in 2021, 2022. Understand that Alexander Nylander has not played an 82-game season in his career. Alexander Nylander, unlike his brother William Nylander, who's been a phenomenal player in Toronto, he has not played an entire campaign of hockey. As a matter of fact, you know who he really reminds me of? And it says we're talking about the Vegas Golden Knights in a second. I might as well bring him up. Nolan Patrick is a perfect parallel for Alexander Nylander. Nolan Patrick is on his third team now. Understand that he was traded from Philadelphia to Nashville and then traded from Nashville immediately to Vegas. Understand, this is a guy, by the way, that was drafted second overall in 2017. Well, Alexander Nylander was drafted 8th overall in 2016. This has been a guy who's gotten injured multiple times. He missed 9 games in his rookie year. This is a guy who also, in the 2019 offseason, had an upper body injury. He also missed some part of that season as well. He also got injured in 2020. This is a guy in 2021 who did not play majority of the seasons. So you look at Nolan Patrick and you compare him to Alexander Nylander. 73 games, 72 games, missed an entire season, 52 games, 25 games. If that does not sound very familiar to Alexander Nylander, I don't know what is. They both missed an entire season due to injury. They have not played an entire season of hockey. And Alexander Nylander and Nolan Patrick have been traded multiple times to different organizations. So my angle to all of you is that Nolan Patrick in Vegas and Alexander Nylander in Pittsburgh are one and the same. They are guys who had a lot of potential, have a lot of talent. They're still young in their career, but they can't stay healthy. They cannot be a healthy player. And one of the most valuable assets in hockey is playing all 82 games. Being a valuable asset in hockey is suiting up and skating in every single game. So for Nolan Patrick, I'm sorry about what happened to him. For William Nylander and Alexander Nylander, I'm sorry about what's happened to you. But the situation is, as much as it pains me to say it, you are being paid to play professional hockey. You are being paid to play every single game. You are getting paid to be on the ice 82 games a season. And unfortunately, both of these guys are young. They're younger than 25, but they can't stay healthy, and they're almost on their way out. Continuing with the NHL conversation here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. The Edmonton Oilers, we have a problem. The Edmonton Oilers have put themselves in a lose-lose situation that I think they have not figured themselves out of yet. Unfortunately, the Edmonton Oilers have trapped themselves into a situation that I unfortunately don't think they can get themselves out of. Now, here's what I mean by this, and here's what I say about that. When it comes to the Edmonton Oilers, I like what Ken Holland and I like what the general manager out there in Edmonton has done. Understand that the Edmonton Oilers having Connor McDavid, the best hockey player in the world, gives them an edge automatically. Understand that the Edmonton Oilers with Ken Holland, with Jay Woodcroft, understand that they have a good situation. I'm not denying that. But the biggest problem that the Edmonton Oilers have had is that if you look at their organization, if you really take a look at what Edmonton has, they're missing one thing. The Edmonton Oilers miss one very key trait that's going to send them downhill. The Edmonton Oilers have a lot of dead money on their books. Not only do they have Oscar Klefbom, who's getting paid $4 million a year, who's not going to play. Not only do they have a 40-year-old goaltender in Mike Smith, who's not going to play this year, but they also are paying Milan Lucic until the end of this year he's not going to play with them. You have James Neal, who you have to pay until 2025 to not play for you. You have Andrej Sekera, who's going to have to pay $1.5 million this season, and he is not playing for you. The Edmonton Oilers unfortunately put themselves in this mess by having not one, not two, not three, but having 5 contracts that will not play for you. You have 5 players that you are paying a lot of money to who will not suit up for you in 2021, 2022. I want you to understand how bad this is. The Edmonton Oilers have a whopping $10.4 million, which appeals to their salary cap, by the way, and those are contracts that will not play in Edmonton. I want everyone to close their eyes. Unless you're driving, then please don't. I want everyone to stop and analyze this for a minute. If you had a business and you had to pay 5 former employees $10.4 million a year to not be at your business, would that be a smart business move? Would you be willing to pay $10.4 million to 5 former employees not to show up and be on your team? Does anybody find that odd that the Edmonton Oilers, thanks to past decisions, have to pay Milan Lucic until this year? They have to pay James Neal near $2 million a year until 2025 because of how bad the contract was. They have to pay a 40-year-old goaltender until this year. I look at the Edmonton Oilers, and I like their roster. I do. I like Edmonton's roster. I like Connor McDavid. I like Leon Draisaitl. I think bringing in Evander Kane from San Jose is a fantastic move. I love what they've done by bringing in Darnell Nurse, signing him to a max deal, and having Tyson Barrie come over. I like what they've done. But what I don't like is the fact that they have handicapped themselves by having $10.4 million that will never play for them. I understand that there are going to be people out there who are going to talk about that. I understand there's going to be people who are going to bring up the fact that they are $6 million over the cap. But understand that that $6 million over the cap includes those players who will not play for them. To kind of parallel it to the Vegas Golden Knights, it's like Shea Weber. Understand that the Vegas Golden Knights have a very similar situation, where Shea Weber, Robin Lehner, Laurent Brisebois, Nolan Patrick, those are guys who are probably not going to play for you this year, and you're going to have to pay them anyway. Understand this is an organization that has near $15 million with 4 players who are not going to suit up for you this year. So unfortunately, if you're the Vegas Golden Knights, you're in the same boat as Edmonton. Vegas is sadly in the same situation where Robin Lehner and Shea Weber and most likely Brisebois and Patrick, they are not going to start for you this year. They are not going to be on your team this year, and yet you're going to have to pay them no matter what. So my angle to all of you is that the Edmonton Oilers and Vegas Golden Knights are screwed. But they're not screwed because of the current roster. They're screwed because of past decisions. They are screwed because they went all in at the casino, and now they have a massive debt that they got to pay back. The Edmonton Oilers gave all this money to James Neal, all this money to Mike Smith, all this money to Milan Lucic, and now they still have to pay it back. The Vegas Golden Knights gave Robin Leonard this big deal, and they still got to pay it back. They acquired Shea Weber knowingly, and they still got to pay him. Understand that the Vegas Golden Knights put themselves in this situation. The Edmonton Oilers put themselves in this situation. And to be blunt, I don't feel bad for them at all. I do not feel bad for Edmonton to still have James Neal on their books until 2025. I do not feel bad that the Vegas Golden Knights have to pay Shea Weber $7.8 million until 2026. No, I don't feel bad for them at all. Because I understand that both of those teams put themselves in that situation. Both teams willingly chose to bring in Shea Weber, willingly chose to bring in James Neal. They didn't have to. They chose to. So my angle to all of you watching around the world is that the Edmonton Oilers have a problem they put themselves in. The Vegas Golden Knights have a problem they put themselves in. And for the next couple of years, they can't get out of it because they chose to put themselves in it. Staying with our NHL conversation here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media, there was fantastic news that came out of Nashville. They have signed Nino Niederreiter to a very solid deal out there in Nashville. It was reported that they have signed him to a 2-year deal worth $8 million. So Nino Niederreiter, he signed a 2-year deal after being with the Minnesota Wild for the last 5 years. And I love this move for one reason. Nino Niederreiter last year had 24 goals, 44 points, and had 5 points in 14 playoff games last year. Understand that Nino Niederreiter has gotten better every single year. Understand that Nino Niederreiter, he had 11 goals in 2019, 20 goals in 2020, and now 24 goals in 2021. Understand that this is a guy who could get to the 30-goal mark in his career. But not only that, he has been a solid player in his career. Outside of an abysmal 2018 where he only played 46 games and had 9 goals, he's averaged 10 or more goals every single year since joining the NHL. Understand, this is a guy who ever since joining the league has been exceptional. Understand, this is a guy who has done whatever it takes to make it in the NHL. This is a guy who put up a 28-goal performance in 2012 and then put up a 24-goal performance in 2014, then put up a 20-goal season in 2015. This is a guy who has hit 20 or more goals 6 times in his career. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that Nino Niederreiter at 29 years old has done incredible in his career. I appreciate the fact that Nino Niederreiter in his 10-year career in the NHL has had 181 goals in his career. And the fact that the Nashville Predators have signed that on and have signed him to a 2-year deal is fantastic. It is a wonderful decision by the Nashville Predators, bringing on Nino Niederreiter onto that organization. I think it's a fantastic move by Nashville. So in one of the best offseason moves of the 2022 NHL offseason, the Nashville Predators signing Nino Niederreiter to a 2-year deal. I love the move. I think Nashville has had a slam dunk home run this 2022 offseason. I give them an up. And lastly, there was the report about Nazem Kadri. Nazem Kadri, the free agent from the Colorado Avalanche, the guy who had a career year last season. This is a guy who, unfortunately, is still unsigned. the former top 10 pick, the guy who spent the last 3 seasons with the Colorado Avalanche. He had 19 goals in 2019, 11 goals in 2020, and 28 goals in 2021. This is a guy in Nazem Kadri who had a career year with 87 points and a plus 13 plus minus. This is a guy who also had 15 points in 16 playoff games for the Colorado Avalanche on their way to the Stanley Cup Championship. Now, you might be asking yourself, if this guy is so good, why is he still available? Well, the reason why he's still available is because he wants to get paid. This is a guy who got paid $4 million a year for the last 7 years. This is a guy who signed a 7-year deal worth $4.5 million with the Toronto Maple Leafs back in 2015, before getting flipped to Colorado, where his base salary was $2.5 million. So Nazem Kadri, after having an 87-point season, wants to get paid. Now, most teams have backed away from it because of the fact that he has a very bad reputation. Understand that Nazem Kadri has put himself in a situation where, unfortunately, he has developed a reputation as a headhunter, as a cheap shot artist, as someone who doesn't play by the rules. Now, here's what I think is going to happen. As later towards the offseason, he's going to have to sign a desperation deal. He's going to have to sign a 1-year deal, probably worth $1.5 million. Okay? A guy who should really be worth about $5 million, he's going to have to sign a 1-year deal, a break it, prove it deal in the NHL. Now, where do I think he will go? Well, I think he'll go to a team that will love his grit. I think that he will go to a team that will love to bring on a Nazem Kadri to go up against Tom Wilson. I think this is an organization who will love to team up Nazem Kadri with Ryan Reeves. I think this is an organization who would love to bring on Nazem Kadri to add some offense and some defense to that organization. I believe that Nazem Kadri will sign a 1-year deal with the New York Rangers. I think the New York Rangers would be a perfect spot for him. He could be either on the second line with Chris Kreider, Vincent Trocheck, or be on the third line with Kaapo Kakko and Samuel Blais. Understand that when it comes to the New York Rangers, I like the organization. I think Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad make a perfect 1-2 punch. And Chris Kreider is a solid player as well. So, I will say right here, right now on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, I have Nazem Kadri going to the New York Rangers on a 1-year deal, $1.5 million, kind of as a prove-it deal since he waited out this long. And we have about 5 minutes left here on the show. And I wanted to take a second to do our Vegas segment. This is a segment we do every single week here on the Sports Angle. And I definitely love doing it. I love talking about all of the teams here in Las Vegas. I want to start out with the Las Vegas Aviators. I appreciate, by the way, Jim Gemma and the Las Vegas Aviators organization for letting us do media last weekend. This past weekend, we went to the Las Vegas Aviators game against the Reno Aces. We took some video. We did some B-roll. We interviewed some people. We talked around. We were doing some media there at Las Vegas Ballpark. We also sat in the media box, watched the game. So I definitely appreciate Jim Gemma and the Las Vegas Aviators organization for doing that for us. We appreciate it. Even though they lost 12-3, the fact is the Las Vegas Aviators are still better than the Oakland Athletics. At least they have a better win-loss record than the Oakland Athletics. And the fact that they've had guys get called up to Oakland because of how well they're doing in Las Vegas is fantastic. The Las Vegas Aces, the good news coming out of that, were the WNBA team, the Las Vegas Aces. They beat the Chicago Sky recently in a very good matchup, and they are 24-10 now on the year. They have now won a trio of games back-to-back-to-back. They beat Seattle. They beat Atlanta. They beat Chicago. And their next game is going to be against the Seattle Aces. That will be this Sunday at the Mitchell Ultra Arena. If you're a fan of basketball, if you're a fan of WNBA, I highly recommend going out and supporting the Las Vegas Aces. I recommend going out and supporting women's basketball. It's a great thing to watch. I have a lot of respect for it. And with them having the best record in the WNBA, they'll definitely be in a playoff spot. So I say go out to watch the Las Vegas Aces taking on Seattle in their regular season finale for the Las Vegas Aces. Definitely go out and check it. Go support women's basketball. Have yourself a good time. Yeah, I also talked about the Las Vegas Raiders. I mentioned the Vegas Golden Knights. What I didn't mention, however, is the Indoor Football League Championship. So this weekend, the Indoor Football Championship will be at the Dollar Loan Center in Henderson, Nevada. So if you're in Henderson, or if you're maybe around Henderson, it is a fantastic experience to go to the Dollar Loan Center. Watch the Indoor Football League, and I highly recommend checking it out. So I will say that them doing their IFL championship game at Dollar Loan Center this weekend, if you can go yourself and buy a ticket, I highly recommend doing so. So this is the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. Go watch all the content on PR Connections Radio. Shout out to Guy Dawson, Brian Gardner, Sandra, Aunt Shirley, everybody who does content on PRConnectionsRadio.com. I appreciate all the work they do. They put in all this effort, and they do all of this talented stuff on PR Connections Radio. Go support everyone on this network. And more importantly, go check out all of the content that PR Connections Radio puts out by going to their YouTube channel, going to their Facebook, going to their website, prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media, and follow all of their social media at PR Connections Radio. Also follow the show at Sports Angle on PR. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe and turn the notification bell so you don't miss any episode of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. As well, go to our Twitter, answer our questions, and go to our Facebook page, as we'll be posting a lot of content on there in the upcoming days. So, this is the Sports Angle. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. Follow me on social media at IanRickelli18. And until next time, we have a fantastic episode planned next week. Episode 22 of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. Going over the NFL awards will be a fantastic show. I highly recommend to you. But until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. Have a good one, and we will see you later.